Today I'm talking about the first layer of AI-ready operations, governance. This is layer 1 of the 5-layer framework, and it's usually the one that gets skipped first. Not because it's not important, but because it's the least exciting part of the demo. It doesn't look like AI. It doesn't feel like innovation. There is no model to show, no interface to impress people with. But this is exactly why it matters. Because this layer is what determines whether everything else actually works, or quietly falls apart later. In episode 1, I made a simple claim. Most AI projects don't fail because of the model. They fail before they ever reach the model. This episode explains why. And if you want the full context of the 5-layer framework, you can watch episode 1 of the series first. But in this episode, we start where most organizations don't. We start with governance. Gartner forecasts that more than 40% of agentic-AI projects will be scrapped by end of 2027. It is important to treat this as a forecast, not a measured outcome, so hold it loosely. But what matters more than the numbers are the reasons behind it. The cost is escalating. We spoke about this. Unclear business value. Inadequate risk controls. And when you look at these reasons, something interesting appears. They are not technical failures, remember this. They are organizational failures. And if I zoom out a bit, there is also a broader pattern I see in the market. A lot of AI adoption today is being driven by urgency, by content cycles, by competitive fear, by the pressure not to fall behind. And that often leads to activities that looks like progress, but isn't necessarily grounded in operational readiness. But notice one thing very clearly. None of these failures come down to the model is not good enough. That is almost never the issue, because the model is only a component. The real system is the operating model around it. How decisions are made, how use cases are selected, how risk is governed, how ownership is defined. And this is exactly where most organizations are currently weak. Not in AI capability, but in operational structure. So the real takeaway from this slide is simple. The model is not the problem, the operating model is. Most people expect AI projects to fail because of technology. They expect the model wasn't good enough, the prompts were poor, or the AI simply wasn't mature enough. In my experience, that's almost never the real reason. After more than 15 years in enterprise operations and transformation, I've seen the same 5 organizational failure modes repeat again and again. And honestly, they are quite boring because they are so predictable. First, no decision rights. Who decides which AI initiative starts? Who decides which one stops? Who owns the risk if an AI agent makes a wrong decision? In many organizations, there is no clear answer. Projects are often driven by the loudest department or the more enthusiastic manager. This is called politics. That's not governance. That's organizational luck. Second, no use case gate. Every department wants AI. HR wants an assistant, finance wants an assistant, procurement wants an assistant, customer service wants the very same thing very quickly. The organization is running 20 different pilots. The problem isn't that these are bad ideas. The problem is they are competing for the same budget, the same technology resources, and the same people. And many of these initiatives shouldn't be AI projects in the first place. We have to be very honest here. Sometimes the right answer is a better workflow, a business rule, or a redesigned process. Governance is about choosing where AI creates the most value. It doesn't say yes to every request. The third point is broken data. This deserves its own episode. AI doesn't clean your data. It's chaos, whatever data already exists. If your master data is inconsistent, duplicated, or incomplete, AI will simply automate those problems faster. We will cover that in detail in episode 3. The fourth point, runaway cost. Many AI pilots look inexpensive, then reality arrives. Token consumption increases, cloud cost grows, human review is still needed, monitoring, security, and licensing all add up. 6 months later, leadership wonders why the budget has doubled, why the business value is still unclear. This isn't a technology problem, it's a governance problem because nobody defined the operating model or the total cost of ownership before launch. The fifth point, no owner after launch. This is probably the most common problem I see. Projects have project managers, but AI systems need operational owner. After the pilot finishes, the implementation team moves on, the business changes, processes evolve, the data changes, but the AI keeps making recommendations. Sometimes they're still correct, sometimes they're confidently wrong. The problem is that nobody is watching. AI isn't a project. It's a production capability that requires continuous ownership. Now, take one step back and look at these 5 failure modes. Only one of them is technical, broken data. The other 4 are governance, ownership, decision making, and operational discipline. This is why I believe the biggest challenge in enterprise AI isn't choosing the right model. It's building the right operating model around it. The question isn't which AI should we buy. The question is, are we ready to govern these digital employees? We've just looked at the 5 most common reasons AI initiatives fail. Now notice something interesting. None of these problems are solved by buying a different AI model. None of them are solved by writing better prompts. None of them are solved by changing vendors. Which brings us to the question I hear from leadership all the time. Which AI agent should we buy? Or which platform should we choose? Should we use Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, Anthropics? Those are all valid questions, but they are not the first questions. They are the second questions, even probably the third questions. The first question is much simpler. Who owns this? And equally important, how do we decide what actually gets built? Because every organization has far more AI ideas than it has capacity to execute. Without a structured way to evaluate those ideas, AI becomes a collection of disconnected experiments. One department builds something. Another department builds something similar. A third department solves a completely different problem. Very quickly, the organization ends up with duplicate effort, inconsistent standards, and no shared direction. That's why successful organizations don't start by buying more AI. They start by building a function that makes consistent decisions. And this doesn't have to be a huge organization. In fact, it shouldn't be. I'm not talking about another committee that meets once a month and slows everything down. I'm talking about a small, deliberately thin function. A team that defines standards, prioritizes use cases, clarifies ownership, reviews risk, and helps the business move faster with confidence. Traditionally, we call that a Center of Excellence, or a COE. Some organizations use different names: AI Office, AI Governance Team, Digital Transformation Office. The name isn't important, the function is. Its purpose isn't to control AI. Its purpose is to make sure organizations invest in the right AI initiatives, in the right order, with the right governance. Because governance isn't about saying no. It's about making sure the organization can confidently say yes to the initiative that creates real business value. Key takeaway. The organizations that succeed with AI don't have better models. They have better decision making. And that's exactly what the well-designed AI Center of Excellence provides. If I had to choose one place to start building AI governance, this would be it. Decision rights. Before you build a single AI agent, answer one simple question. Who gets to decide? It sounds obvious, but in many organizations, these decisions have never actually been documented. Everyone assumes someone else owns them. Let's look at a few examples. Who approves which AI use case should be built? Every department has ideas, but not every idea deserves investment. Let's be honest here. Someone has to decide which initiatives align with business priority and which ones should wait. Who approves production rollout? Building a prototype is one thing. Putting an AI agent into production is something completely different. Who makes that final decision? Who is comfortable accepting the operational risk? Who owns the budget? AI isn't free. There are licensing costs, model usage, cloud infrastructure, security, monitoring. Human oversight. When costs increase, who owns that budget? And who decides whether the business value will justify the investment? Who will accept that risk? If an AI agent makes an incorrect recommendation, or exposes confidential information, or disrupts a business process, think of it. Who accepts responsibility? Because the technology doesn't own the consequences. People do. Who is allowed to change the AI after deployment? Can someone update the prompts, replace the model, connect another data source, change an integration, or does every change require governance approval? Without clear rules, well-intended changes can introduce completely new risks. What's interesting is that none of these questions are technical. They are management questions. They are governance questions, and yet very few organizations write them down. Everyone assumes someone knows the answer. Then 6 months later, an AI capability appears in production. Nobody remembers who approved it. Nobody remembers who owns it. And nobody wants to take responsibility when something goes wrong. I've seen this pattern many times, not just in AI, but in ERP implementations, master data programs, shared services, digital transformations. When decision rights aren't defined upfront, organizations don't move faster, they move into confusion. That's why I always recommend documenting these decisions before the first production deployment. It takes a few hours, but it can save duplicate effort and governance discussions later. Key takeaway: good governance doesn't create bureaucracy. It creates clarity and allows organizations to move faster with confidence. Now we move to the second mechanism in the operating model, the use case gate. If decision rights define who decides, the gate defines how decisions are made consistently. Because in reality, every department wants an AI agent. HR wants one, finance wants one, customer service wants one. And very quickly, the organization is flooded with ideas. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of these ideas should not be AI agents. Many of them shouldn't even be an AI project. Some of them should be a simple business rule, a report, or just a better form. So the question becomes, how do you decide what is worth building? You don't do it through opinions. You do it through a structured gate. Every candidate use case should be evaluated using the same dimensions. First, value what is the actual business impact. Not theoretical, not this might save time, but measurable values. Second, data readiness. Do we actually have the data to support this? Is it complete? Is it consistent? Is it trusted? Or are we expecting the AI to somehow compensate for poor data quality? Third, what happens if this AI is wrong? Is it a minor inconvenience? Or does it affect financial decisions, customers, or compliance? Fourth, how complex is this to build, integrate, and maintain? Not just the initial build, but ongoing operations. Fifth, that's ROI. Does the expected return justify the investment? Not just cost savings, but overall business value. And sixth, time to value how quickly will this deliver impact. 30 days, 3 months, a year, because some initiatives are valuable, but not urgent. When you evaluate use cases across these 6 dimensions, something important happens. You stop debating based on enthusiasm. You start comparing based on structure. And then you apply a simple output model. Go build it. Clear value, acceptable risk, good data readiness, pilot. With guardrails, this is in controlled environment. Maybe the data is not perfect yet. Maybe the risk needs constraints. Maybe we need human in the loop validation. But it has potential. Park. Not because it's a bad idea, but because something is missing. Usually data readiness. And here's the important part. You don't just say no. You explain exactly what needs to be fixed for it to move forward. That alone changes organizational behavior. Because suddenly AI is not going to be any longer a collection of discontinued ideas. It becomes a portfolio of decisions. Decisions which are comparable, prioritized, managed, just like any other enterprise investment portfolio. And once you reach that point, you're no longer doing AI experimentation. You're doing AI portfolio management, which is what governance actually is. Now, when people hear the word center of excellence, they often imagine the wrong thing. They imagine a large committee, 40 people, endless meetings, approval chains, and a process that slows everything down. That's not what we're talking about. In fact, that version of a center of excellence usually makes things worse, not better. It becomes a bottleneck instead of an enabler. What we're talking about is something very different. A team function, small on purpose, typically 3 to 8 people, not a committee, not a reporting layer, not a governance theater function, a real operating unit for AI decision making. And it owns a very specific set of responsibilities. First, the charter and decision rights, it defines how AI decisions are made in the organization. Not all the project levels, but at the system level. Second, the use case gate, it ensures every AI initiative is evaluated consistently. Same scoring logic, same criteria, same decision outputs. Go, pilot, or park. Third, evaluation standards, because building AI is not enough. You need to define what good looks like. Accuracy thresholds, reliability standards, human in the loop expectations, red line behaviors. Fourth, risk register and autonomy tiers. Not all AI systems should operate at the same level of autonomy. Some are advisory, some are semi-automated, some can execute actions. Each level has different controls, and someone has to define and manage that structure. Fifth, architecture. Not building every system, but ensuring systems are consistent. Data flows are coherent. Integrations are controlled. And fragmentation doesn't take over. Sixth, vendor management, because most enterprises won't have one AI system. They'll have many. Multiple models, multiple platforms, multiple APIs. Someone needs to manage that complexity intentionally. Seventh, education. Not just training users, but building organizational literacy around AI. What it can do, what it shouldn't do, and how to think about it in operational terms. And finally, run and maintain ownership. This is critical. AI systems don't end at deployment. They drift. Data changes, the business rule change, process evolves. So someone must own ongoing performance and correction. When you put all of this together, something important becomes clear. This is not large bureaucracy. It's a small, high-leverage operating function. And its job is not to slow the organization down. Its job is to make it safe, to move faster. Because without this function, every team invents its own rules. Every team builds its own version of AI governance, and the organization fragments. With it, on the contrary, you get consistency. You get speed through structure, not speed through chaos. So the conclusion is simple. A center of excellence is not about scale. It's about leverage. Now we take everything we've talked about so far. Decision rights, use case gates, center of excellence, and we wrap it into a lifecycle. Because governance isn't a document. And it's not a one-time design exercise. It's a continuous operating model. Every AI system, every agent, every automation follows the same life cycle. It starts with the intake, ideas coming from across the organization. Use cases are proposed, problems are described, then comes selection. This is where the use case gate applies. We decide what is worth pursuing, what has value, what has data readiness. We decide what has acceptable risks. Then design. We define how the system will work, what data it uses, what the interaction model is, what the constraints are. And then we build. We implement the agent or the system, integrate it, train it, configure it, then test and govern. This is where many organizations think the work is done, but it's not. We validate performance. We test edge cases. We check risk behavior. We apply governance standards. And then, finally, we roll out. We move from controlled environment to real users, real data with real consequences. Then run. And this is where the model breaks in most organizations. Because running is not glamorous. It's operational work, monitoring performance, handling expectations, ensuring stability. Then improve. Because data changes. Process will change as well. Business conditions will change. So the system has to evolve. And finally, decommission. Because not every AI system should live forever. Some become obsolete, some are replaced, some are no longer aligned with business value, but most organizations never explicitly retire AI systems. They just quietly decay. Now, here's the key insight. Look at how organizations typically behave. They would invest heavily in the first part of this life cycle. Intake, selection, design, build, test, go live. But the real value and the real risk lives in the last part. Run, improve, decommission. Because that's where the systems actually interact with reality. That's where the data is going to drift. That's where processes evolve. That's where unintended behavior emerges. And that's where cost accumulates. But it's also where most governance frameworks stop. They treat AI like a project, not like a system. And that's the fundamental shift. An AI agent is not a deliverable. It's not something you finish. It's a system in production. It lives. It changes. It needs ownership. So if there is one thing to take away from this slide, it's this. We don't need better AI projects. We actually need a better lifecycle management. Now we move to something most organizations completely skip. Not whether AI should exist, not even what it should do, but how much autonomy it should have. Because not all AI systems should operate at the same level of independence. And this is where most failures happen. We need explicitly defined autonomy tiers, starting from the lowest level. Level 0 suggests. Human decides at this level. The AI is purely advisory. It provides recommendations, it drafts output, but the human always makes the final decision. This is very similar to how most chat-based agents operate today. They assist, but they do not act. Next, level 1. Drafts, human approves. Here the AI starts doing more of the work. It generates outputs that are almost ready to use. But the human still reviews and approves before anything is executed. You can think of this as human-in-the-loop execution. Level 2. Executes with defined boundaries, and then human audit. Now, we move into partial autonomy. The AI can execute actions, but only within strict constraints. Predefined rules, approved data sources, clear boundaries. Humans do not approve every action, but they audit samples and monitor behavior. Next is level 3, full execution with escalation only. This is high autonomy. The AI runs the process, humans only intervene when something goes wrong or crosses a defined threshold. At this level, the AI behaves more like an operational system than a tool. Now, the important insights. Each of these levels require completely different controls, different monitoring, different risk management, different governance intensity, different accountability structures. And here's where organizations get into trouble. They often make a critical mistake. They assign level 3 autonomy, but only implement level 0 controls. In other words, a highly autonomous system with minimal governance, a confident agent with no real breaks. And that combination is where most operational risk emerges. Not because AI is dangerous, but because autonomy was not intentionally designed. The real question is not, can this AI do the task? The real question is, how much autonomy are we giving it? And are our controls aligned with that level? Once you start thinking in tiers, everything becomes clearer. You stop debating AI in general terms and you start designing it like an operating system with explicit levels of control. There is one final warning I want to leave with you. Because governance itself has a failure mode, and it's an important one. When governance becomes too slow, too heavy, too bureaucratic, it stops enabling the organization. And something else happens instead. People stop using it. They route around it. They build their own solutions, they deploy their own AI tools, they start experimenting outside the system. And suddenly, you don't have less risk, you have invisible risk. Because now nothing is tracked. Nothing is governed, nothing is consistent. This is what we call shadow AI, and it appears not because people are malicious, but because the official system is too slow to be useful. So good governance has to be fast and decisive. A clear no with a reason is actually enabling, because it tells people exactly what needs to change. It creates direction, it creates clarity, and it allows progress. But a slow maybe, it's definitely not governance, it's theater, because it delays decisions without improving them. And in enterprise environment, delayed decisions usually just become unmanaged decisions. So the role of governance is not to say no, it's to enable organizations to say yes, safely, repeatedly, and with confidence. If you remember nothing else from this episode, remember this. Governance is not a gate that blocks AI. It is a system that allows AI to scale responsibly. Before we close, there is a simple tool you can use. The AI Ready Operations Assessment. It turns everything we've discussed into a structure check. Decision rights, use case gating, data readiness, autonomy levels, operational ownership. And it helps you understand where your organization actually is today. Not where you think it is, but where it really is. In the next episode, we move to layer 2, clean data. And this is where things get even more interesting, because AI doesn't fix data problems, it amplifies them. Don't build better AI, build better operations.